The gold ring on my finger had never been expensive. At least that was what everyone at the company believed. For 6 years, I had worked quietly in the operations department. I never chased promotions, never joined office gossip, and never tried to impress executives. I simply did my job and went home. My name is Paige, and the ring on my finger belonged to my father. I wore it every day because of something he told me years ago. Why you're Paige, never reveal your strength until people become careless enough to underestimate you. Why you're. I never understood what he meant. Not until the morning Courtney Blake laughed at my ring in front of the entire executive team. Courtney was the 24-year-old daughter of our vice president, Gregory Blake. She had been given a management position despite having almost no experience. Everyone knew why she had the job. Her father protected her. During a Monday morning strategy meeting, I was sitting quietly near the end of the conference table when Courtney suddenly noticed my hand. She smiled. Why Euro Paige? Is that actually a real ring? Why Euro? I looked at her. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. She laughed. Why Euro Pit looks like something you would find in a flea market. Why Euro? A few people nervously smiled. Courtney continued. Why Euro seriously? Couldn't you afford something better? Why Euro? The room became uncomfortable. I looked at the ring and then back at her. Why Euro no? I couldn't. Why Euro? She laughed even harder. Her father Gregory chuckled from across the table. That was when I realized something. They had no idea who they were insulting. My father, Julian Vance, had disappeared from the financial world almost 10 years earlier. Before disappearing, he had been one of the most powerful private investors in the country. But very few people knew that. And even fewer knew about the agreement connected to that ring. I had never spoken about it until that afternoon. Our company was preparing for the most important meeting in its history. A billionaire investor named Carlton Drake was coming to review a massive funding proposal. If he approved the deal, the company would receive hundreds of millions in new investment. Gregory had spent months preparing for the meeting. He believed his position was secure. He was wrong. I was walking through the main hallway when the private elevator opened. Carlton Drake stepped out. The entire reception area became silent. He was known for being cold, demanding, and nearly impossible to impress. As he walked past me, his eyes suddenly stopped on my hand. He froze. His expression changed completely. He stared at the ring. Then he looked at me. Why Euro, where did you get that? Why Euro? His voice was quiet. Why Euro P me father gave it to me. Why Euro jaw father? Why Euro? Why Euro Julian Vance? Carlton's face went pale. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he asked, why Euro Julian Vance is your father? Why Euro? I nodded. Carlton looked at the ring again. Why I need to speak with you after the meeting. Why Euro? Then he walked toward the boardroom. I continued to my desk as if nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, the executive meeting began. Gregory stood proudly at the front of the room, presenting his company's financial projections. Courtney sat beside him, looking completely confident. Carlton listened silently. Then, halfway through Gregory's presentation, Carlton raised his hand. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Gregory immediately stopped talking. Carlton slowly stood. Why I have one question. Why Euro? Gregory smiled nervously. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Carlton looked toward me. Why Euro Paige? Come here. Why Euro? Every person in the room turned toward me. I walked to the front. Carlton looked directly into my eyes. Why Euro? Tell them your father's full name. Why Euro? Why Euro Julian Vance? Gregory's smile disappeared. Carlton turned toward him. Why Euro Jew knew about Julian Vance? Why Euro? Gregory shook his head. Why Euro no? I didn't know she was his daughter. Why Euro? Carlton placed his hands on the table. Why Euro? Then you clearly don't know the history of your own company. Why Euro? Nobody spoke. Carlton explained that years ago, when the company was nearly bankrupt, Julian Vance had secretly provided emergency financing. But it wasn't simply a loan. Julian had protected the company under a private agreement. The agreement gave his family certain controlling rights if the original conditions were ever violated. Carlton was one of the few people who knew about that agreement. And he knew exactly what the ring represented. Why euro this ring, why euro, Carlton said, pointing toward my hand. I asked the symbol attached to that agreement. Why euro? Courtney stared at me in disbelief. The same woman who had mocked it that morning now couldn't take her eyes off it. Gregory suddenly began sweating. Why, gee, Mr. Drake, whatever this is, we can discuss it privately. Why? Carlton shook his head. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. He closed the folder in front of him. Why, I'm canceling the funding agreement. Why euro? Gregory's face turned white. Why euro, please, sir? You don't understand. Why euro? Why, I understand perfectly. Why euro? Carlton looked at me. Then he looked back at Gregory. Why euro you allowed your daughter to humiliate the daughter of the man who saved this company? Why euro? Courtney lowered her head. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing to say. Carlton walked out. The room remained silent long after the doors closed. By the end of the day, rumors were everywhere. People who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted to talk to me. Managers became unusually polite. Coworkers started asking about my father. I answered none of them. The next morning, Gregory called me into his office. His confidence was gone. He had spent the entire night searching through old company records. Why, I found the agreement. Why euro, he said. I remained silent. He placed a document on his desk. Why euro, your father saved this company? Why euro? The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. Why euro, want you knew? Why euro? Why euro, me father told me never to use his name unless it was necessary. Gregory looked embarrassed. Why euro, why didn't you tell us? Why euro? I looked at him. Why euro, Pebecos? I wanted to know how people treated me when they thought I had no power. Why euro? He had no answer. Later that afternoon, Carlton returned. He walked straight toward me. Why I owe your father a great deal. Why euro, he said. Why euro you hot do you want from me? Why euro? He smiled slightly. Why euro a nothing? I'm here to ask what you want to do. Why euro? I looked around the office. For 6 years, I had watched managers abuse their authority. I had watched talented employees get ignored while executives protected their relatives. I had watched people become powerful simply because they knew the right person. Now I had the opportunity to change it. Why I want a complete audit. Why euro, I said. Carlton nodded. Why euro everything? Why euro? Why euro everything? Why euro? The investigation began immediately. Within a week, financial irregularities were discovered. Courtney was removed from her position. Gregory was dismissed soon after. Their offices were emptied, and their belongings were carried out in cardboard boxes. The same people who once laughed when Courtney mocked my ring now stood silently as she walked past them. I never celebrated. I simply returned to my desk. Months later, I was appointed to oversee the company's operations. The old culture disappeared. Promotions were based on performance. Financial decisions required transparency. Family connections no longer guaranteed protection. And I continued wearing my father's ring. One evening, I stood alone in my office and looked at it. I finally understood what he had meant. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need expensive clothes, loud speeches, or a powerful title. Sometimes, power looks like an ordinary woman sitting quietly at the end of a conference table. Sometimes it looks like an old gold ring everyone is foolish enough to laugh at. And sometimes, the people who think they are untouchable discover too late that they have been standing on someone else's foundation all along. I never needed to destroy Courtney or Gregory. They destroyed themselves the moment they decided that someone who looked powerless must actually be powerless. All I had to do was wait. And when the right moment came, I simply stepped out of the shadows.